Hello, dear Sangha. Okay, recording in progress. So, hello, dear Sangha. It's great to see you all again. I want to make it so that I can see you all. Okay. So welcome to my Dharma talk for today. And I'm happy to present on the Buddha's discourse on happiness. But before I do that, I would like to throw you all a little curveball. Bobby mentioned that we all have the Buddha nature within ourselves, and we all have the qualities of enlightenment within ourselves. So I always like to kind of prompt my listeners to see what their definitions are of the thing that I'm about to describe. And so I've had Paul pull up a little Word note document that has the words happiness on it, or the letters of the word happiness on it. And is that, can you pull that up on the screen, Paul? Okay, happiness. And so I would like to have you all do that in kind of a vertical space and try to work amongst yourselves and create a sentence using the letters of the words happiness that defines something about maybe the practice of happiness or a way of arriving at greater happiness in our lives. So maybe the H starts off the sentence, then the A, then the S is the final word of the sentence. Does all that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to have you all brainstorm, and Paul's going to type up what you come up with in a vertical line, spelling out the word happiness. It's an acrostic is the name of what this is called. So we're going to start out with this acrostic of the word happiness.
Healthy.
Harmony. Yes. H. Harmony.
Are we just doing H's? I don't know. I don't know.
No, we're going along. We just happen to have two H's.
I thought we start with H and A.
Now we're doing A, right?
Awareness.
So Nick, are we making a sentence or we're just kind of listing words?
Yeah, the goal is to make a sentence, which is harder. It might sound kind of silly, but so it should be like, I don't know, you have health and then maybe the P stands for something. It's up to you.
Arise, so we have a verb.
Okay.
Well, health arise, does that make sense?
Health and harmony arise.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Peacefully.
Peacefully.
Purposefully. Interconnecting. Now.
Doesn't make sense.
Can we find a way to make the word Sangha in there connect with the rest of the sentence?
Serenity.
In the serene Sangha.
Okay. Give yourselves a round of applause for making this sentence. So health and harmony arise peacefully, purposefully, interconnecting now with equanimity in the Sangha serenely.
Yeah.
So I really like that sentence you all crafted. Thank you for putting your creative minds together to make that sentence. And that brings me some happiness to just see what you all created together. So yeah, happiness is something that is vital to life. It's something that all beings desire. I think everyone wants to be happy in some form or another. I don't think everyone necessarily feels happy in their life, or everyone experiences lasting happiness in their life. But I think underneath a lot of our disappointments, underneath a lot of our fears, underneath a lot of our concerns that we have in our life is the wish to be happy. We want to be happy. We want things to be going well for us. And we want to not suffer. We don't want to experience pain. We don't want to experience more suffering. And one thing I appreciate about the Buddhist path is this emphasis on all along the way, with every step of the path, every time we make a step and try to grow in mindfulness, our intention is to cultivate more and more happiness for ourselves and for other beings, and also to decrease our level of suffering for ourselves and for other beings. I think those two things go hand in hand. When we decrease our suffering, we're automatically more happy. And when we see that we've helped other people decrease their suffering, that leads to a lot more happiness in our lives. And so I wanted to share these teachings that come from this book by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's called Two Treasures. And it's a really small book. And the two treasures in this book are, there's the sutra on the 8 realizations of great beings, which I might reserve for another Dharma talk in the future. And then there's also the Discourse on Happiness. And if we have enough time today, there might be a little bit of a bonus round, which is kind of a third treasure that's hidden in this book as well. So we'll get started. This is the Discourse on Happiness, and I'm just going to recite this from the book, and then I'll pause at certain moments after each kind of stanza, and I'll give a little bit of a reflection on maybe what comes up for me or what experiences I've had in my life with this aspect of the teaching. So the Discourse on Happiness. I heard these words of the Buddha one time when the Lord was living in the vicinity of Savatthi at the Antapindika monastery in Jeta Grove. Late at night, a deva appeared whose light and beauty made the whole Jeta Grove shine radiantly. After paying respects to the Buddha, the deva asked him a question in the form of a verse. So this is one really interesting part that I see in the Buddhist kind of cosmology, the Buddhist teachings. A deva would be kind of a being that is similarly associated to like an angel or something. And so it's interesting that the Buddha had attained such a state of awakening that these angels or these kind of enlightened or light-filled beings would approach him and ask him for advice. You would think that being a human being, the Buddha would be asking these beings for advice, but in the Buddha's path, they turn and they ask him for advice. So I thought that was an interesting point. So this deva approaches the Buddha and asks him, many gods and men, it says gods and men, but probably women are curious to know as well, what are the greatest blessings which bring about a peaceful and happy life? Please, Tathagata, will you teach us? And this is the Buddha's answer. So the first thing he says is not to be associated with the foolish ones, to live in the company of wise people, honoring those who are worth honoring. This is the greatest happiness. So when I hear that, honoring the right people, one of the first things that comes to mind is being a child and having certain role models and looking up to people because of certain qualities that they have. whether it's painting a picture or singing a beautiful song or sinking a halftime three-pointer at the perfect moment. We tend to cherish and honor people because of certain qualities. But then as I got older, and especially as I practiced the Buddhist path, I kind of realized that maybe some of the people that I had as role models weren't necessarily people that were worth looking up to, if that makes sense. So they had certain qualities that were good. But then when you look into their personal lives and maybe the way that they treat people and they treat others and the way that they act in their personal lives, or maybe if you look more deeply into the lyrics of the music that they're singing and kind of the imprints that it's leaving on people's consciousness, I start to realize maybe these people aren't really worth my admiration and my time and my attention. The impact and the influence they're having on my life isn't really a wholesome thing that I want to cherish and continue to put out in my own life. So from that, you continue to kind of look for role models. And along the way, you find people that are bodhisattvas, or people that are trying very hard to create the energy of awakening, the energy of awareness, who are trying very hard to create, minimize suffering and create more happiness for other beings. And now when I look at that, when I see people who I consider bodhisattvas, people who are helping others to transform their mental energy from despair to more joy and awakening, I feel a great joy and I want to emulate that. And so people that engage in community service, people that teach meditation, people that approach their lives with mindfulness and fearlessness are people that become those that I look up to and esteem. And as I esteem them, I can learn things from them that can really benefit my life. So that's the first answer of what the Buddha says. The second thing the Buddha says is to live in a good environment and have planted good seeds and to realize that you are on the right path. This is the greatest happiness. And so again, maybe as you start to walk the path, you might hear back from people and say, hey, I really appreciated this thing that you said, or I really appreciated your energy and the way that you approached me in this, or that thing that you helped me with, that was a really helpful act. So those are some signs that you know that you're on the right path, that maybe people come up to you with gratitude about what you've shared or the way that you've lived, or just the absence of people kind of calling you out for generating more suffering in their life. That could be another way. Planting good seeds means watering those wholesome seeds of mindfulness, kindness, compassion, and joy in people's lives. Knowing that you've planted those seeds and that you haven't stirred people to more anger and sorrow and anxiety and those types of things. The next thing the Buddha said is to have a chance to learn and grow, to be skillful in your profession or craft, practicing this precepts and loving speech. This is the greatest happiness. So having a profession or craft, and in the Buddhist path, he talks about right livelihood. So having a livelihood that can help to be a form of justice, which helps to lessen the bridge between the super wealthy and the poor, and at least does not create circumstances where beings are being taken advantage of or being treated unwholesomely for the benefit of certain people that are gaining financially in that way. So that's one element of having a wise or a wholesome profession or craft. So right livelihood is another aspect of the path of happiness to the Buddha. The next thing he says is to be able to serve and support your parents, to cherish your own family, to have a vocation that brings you joy. This is the greatest happiness. So similar to the last one, vocation or a profession that brings you joy. I think Tony Hawk said that if you go to work every day and you love what you're doing, it's not really work. Now we can't all be doing 360 backflips off of off of half pipes, but if we can try to bring a little bit more love, a little bit more attentiveness, a little bit more mindfulness into whatever job we do, that can be beneficial. I think every job has some quality of where we're not really thrilled to be doing what we're doing. But if we can have some aspects of things that we look forward to in our day-to-day life in our job, that can help to relieve a lot of stress and add a lot of purpose. Additionally, to serve and support our parents, maintaining good relationships with our parents, that can be a really big source of joy. I think our parents oftentimes can be one of our longest relationships and our longest kind of teaching and learning relationships in our lives. So that can be a source of joy to have a family that we feel supported by, that we feel loved by. The next thing the Buddha says is to live honestly, generous in giving, to offer support to relatives and friends, living a life of blameless conduct. This is the greatest happiness. So to practice generosity and have that as your intention as you move throughout your day, rather than attempting to accumulate more and more goods for yourself, more and more material possessions, your goal is to give out to people, to support people in the community that are in need, while also looking after our own needs, but also trying to simplify our lives. I think this comes a little bit later in the teaching. The next point that the Buddha makes is to avoid unwholesome actions, not caught by alcoholism or drugs, and to be diligent in doing good things. This is the greatest happiness. So firstly, he says, avoiding unwholesome actions. To me, the definition of an unwholesome action is an action that you're doing that you would not want to be on the receiving end of. So whether it's saying harsh speech or just acting in a way that doesn't end in benefit for both parties, that's one thing that could be seen as unwholesome. And I would say a wholesome action is something that if you were on the receiving end of that action or the receiving end of that speech, you would be happy to hear that. It's something that creates more happiness in your life. Not being caught by alcoholism or drugs, I think, is an important quality as well. You can look back in history and see that alcoholism and drugs have been the source of a great amount of suffering for societies, whether it's the crack epidemic or the presence of drunk drivers causing tragedies, or just the everyday family emotional trauma that's caused by alcoholism and drug addiction, and just the sense of potential that is not able to manifest due to drug addiction. There's a lot of suffering that's out there when people get caught in drugs and alcohol. And the Buddha's practice of mindfulness is a way of reducing craving and reducing the sense of running after pleasurable things that underlies the getting caught in drugs and alcohol. So if we can learn to be present and be grateful for simple things in our lives, that helps us to not need to chase after these substances in order to try to create this kind of temporary feeling of happiness. If we can have deep, lasting peace and happiness, we don't need to engage in those behaviors, and our lives can be transformed as a result. The next thing the Buddha says is to be humble and polite in manner, to be grateful and content with a simple life, not missing the occasion to learn the Dharma. This is the greatest happiness. Gratitude and contentment lead to simplicity, and they lead to not running after things in order to seek out temporary happiness. And also just being, having kind of that hunger and thirst for the Dharma, looking forward to a Dharma talk, whether it's at the Dallas Meditation Center, whether it's reading a book, or whether it's seeking out the Dharma in other ways through just honest living. It's also possible to get some Dharma from the sound of a flowing river or a tall tree. If our minds are still and present, we can notice that there are many things in our environment that are giving us a Dharma talk, that are trying to tell us something about the true nature of the way things are. So if we're quiet and still enough, we can hear the Dharma flowing in from many different directions. So next, the Buddha says to persevere and be open to change, to have regular contact with monks and nuns, and to fully participate in Dharma discussions. This is the greatest happiness. So to have regular contact with monks and nuns, I think that also applies to, while there are monasteries such as Magnolia Grove Monastery that I really appreciate, and every time I go there, I feel completely refreshed and my practice is deepened as a result. If we're not able to get to monasteries, I think it's okay to just come to the Dallas Meditation Center, or to also look up maybe a Sangha on Zoom as well. Thich Nhat Hanh created the Order of Interbeing, which applies to both lay people and monastics, so that we can continue to deepen our practice all together. Back in the Buddha's day, in the Buddha's time, when his Sangha was growing, and in India overall, it's way more common to find areas where there's monks and nuns that are ready to practice. But here in the States, it's a lot rarer to find communities of monks and nuns. So I think it's okay to seek out spiritual teachers that practice meditation and to have contact with them, to ask questions about your practice and to help grow your meditation practice. That leads to the greatest happiness. The next is to live diligently and attentively, to perceive the noble truths, and to realize nirvana. This is the greatest happiness. I'll focus mostly on the first part of that, to live diligently and attentively. Diligence means having energy, having perseverance, coming back to the practice, keeping up the practice, and not pushing ourselves too hard to attain something outside of ourselves, because then we might get drained and worn out. But it's having diligence coupled with grace, giving ourselves grace, but continuing to practice. I think if we push ourselves too hard, we might drop out. But if we continue and we're gentle with ourselves, we can persist and make it a lot further than we normally would. And it says to realize nirvana. Nirvana is the dimension that goes beyond signs or words. So I could say a lot about nirvana, but all of those words wouldn't necessarily capture what nirvana is. We have to touch the dimension that goes beyond words, which is kind of ironic because I'm giving you a Dharma talk with a lot of words right now. But as you listen, you still have to listen behind for the dimension that goes beyond words. So there's two more sections to this sutra on happiness. The Buddha says to live in the world with your heart undisturbed by the world, with all sorrows ended, dwelling in peace. This is the greatest happiness. So living in the world, in this historical dimension, with our heart undisturbed by the world, maybe our heart is in the ultimate dimension, where we see that in reality, there is no birth, no death, there's no coming and no going. There's the stillness and the peace and the joy of the practice. And with that realization, our sorrows can end. When we stop clinging, when we stop running after things, and we become more still and watch things as they arise and pass, we can experience a profound sense of peace, which leads to happiness. Peace and happiness walk side by side, and they support each other, they benefit each other. And then the last one is the last section, the Buddha says, "For the one who accomplishes this is unvanquished wherever she goes. Always she is safe and happy. Happiness lives within oneself." So that goes back to one of the Buddha's final teachings where he says, form an island within yourself. Touch the dimension where your happiness and your joy and your peace can't be disturbed by the phenomena that come and go in the phenomenal world. Happiness lives within oneself. And so that's almost like a challenge to us. When things aren't going our way, is there some way that we can still maintain happiness? When the world is in a state of chaos, is there some way that we can still maintain a state of happiness? Even though happiness shouldn't be confused with indifference. We're not indifferent to what's going on in the world, but we have to maintain our peace and our happiness no matter what's happening at all times. And then as I say that, we also still have to be able to experience the difficult emotions. We can't push down and try to escape from difficult emotions that may arise, but we also learn to not identify with those feelings, because we see that underneath the coming and going of things, there is a profound happiness and joy which can stay. So I would like to open for sharing. Thank you all so much for listening. I'd like to open for sharing and reflections. And if we do have a little bit of time at the end, I'll go ahead and do the bonus round. But I'm interested to hear what you all have to say about this sutra on happiness. So thank you all for listening.